I was never good at being alone. The city had always felt like a maze of strangers, and I had become a ghost drifting through its neon-lit streets. I moved here for work, leaving behind the small town where I had friends, family, and a sense of belonging. Video games had been my solace, the only constant in my new, empty life. Then, I met her. Her name was Emily. She had an infectious laugh, a spark in her eyes that could light up the darkest room, and a sense of adventure that drew me in like a moth to a flame. We met at a mutual friend's party, and before I knew it, we were spending every free moment together. For the first time since I moved, I felt alive. Emily became my world. So, when she told me about her dream of backpacking through Asia, I couldn't say no. I had to support her. I watched her plan, pack, and finally leave. And then the loneliness returned, more suffocating than ever. I found myself counting the days until she came back, each one stretching into eternity. I tried to fill the void with video games, but they no longer held any joy. The city felt even colder, its streets more labyrinthine. It was during one of those long, sleepless nights that I first heard the whispers. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, a symptom of my growing depression. But the whispers persisted, a soft murmur in the dark corners of my apartment. I couldn't make out the words, but they were there, just beyond the edge of comprehension. I started seeing things out of the corner of my eye. Shadows that moved when they shouldn't. Figures that vanished when I turned to look. I told myself it was the loneliness, the stress of missing Emily. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to get out of the apartment, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. As I walked through the empty streets, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, but there was no one there. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. I ended up at a small, rundown bar at the edge of the city. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions, where the bartender had seen it all. I ordered a drink and sat in a corner, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. "Rough night?" the bartender asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. "You have no idea," I replied, taking a sip of my drink. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, leaning against the bar. "Maybe I have," I muttered, more to myself than to him. The bartender raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. As the night wore on, the bar filled with people, the noise drowning out the whispers in my head. For a moment, I felt almost normal. But when I left, the presence was there, waiting for me. I hurried home, my mind racing. I locked the door behind me, but I knew it wouldn't keep out whatever was haunting me. I turned on every light in the apartment, hoping the brightness would chase away the shadows. But the whispers grew louder, and the shadows seemed to deepen. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the middle of the living room, clutching a kitchen knife, waiting for something, anything, to happen. When dawn finally broke, I was exhausted, but the whispers had stopped. I tried to convince myself it was a one-time thing, a result of stress and lack of sleep. But the next night, it happened again. And the night after that. The presence was always there, lurking just out of sight, whispering in a language I couldn't understand. I started avoiding the apartment as much as possible. I spent my days wandering the city, trying to lose myself in the crowds. But no matter where I went, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. One evening, I found myself back at the bar. The bartender gave me a sympathetic look as I ordered my drink. "You look like hell," he said. "I feel like it," I replied. "What's going on with you?" he asked, his tone more serious than before. I hesitated, unsure of how much to tell him. "I've been seeing things, hearing things. I think something is following me." He didn't laugh or brush it off. Instead, he nodded, slowly. "There are things in this world we don't understand. Sometimes they latch onto us when we're vulnerable." How do I get rid of it?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "There are ways," he said, leaning closer. "But they're not easy, and they're not without risk." "I'll do anything," I said, my hands trembling. He gave me a long, hard look before nodding. "Come back tomorrow night. I'll have something for you." I left the bar feeling a strange mix of hope and fear. I didn't know what the bartender had in mind, but I was willing to try anything. That night, the whispers were louder than ever, and I barely slept. The next evening, I returned to the bar. The bartender was waiting for me, a small, worn book in his hands. "This is an old book," he said, handing it to me. "It has rituals and spells. They might help you, but be careful. These things have a way of turning on you." I took the book, feeling its weight in my hands. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Good luck," he replied, his expression grave. I went home and started reading the book. It was filled with strange symbols and incantations, things that made my skin crawl. But I was desperate. I chose a ritual that seemed straightforward, one that promised to banish malevolent spirits. I gathered the necessary items, candles, salt, a mirror, and set up in the living room. As I began the ritual, I felt the presence grow stronger, the whispers turning into a cacophony of voices. I forced myself to keep going, chanting the words from the book. The air grew cold, and the shadows in the room seemed to come alive. I saw a figure in the mirror, a dark, twisted shape that sent a wave of terror through me. I kept chanting, my voice shaking but determined. Suddenly, the figure lunged at me, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. I fell to the floor, clutching at the wound, but the ritual wasn't complete. I dragged myself back to the mirror, blood staining the carpet, and finished the incantation. There was a blinding flash of light, and then silence. The presence was gone. The whispers had stopped. I lay on the floor, gasping for breath, but alive. In the days that followed, the shadows retreated, and the city seemed a little less daunting. Emily's messages from Asia became my lifeline. Her words a reminder that I wasn't alone. I started playing video games again, reconnecting with old friends online. When Emily finally came back, I told her everything. She listened, her eyes wide with concern, but she believed me. We moved to a new apartment, one filled with light and laughter. The shadows stayed away, and the whispers became a distant memory. The city no longer felt like a maze of strangers. With Emily by my side, it became a place of possibilities, a place where I could build a new life. And as the days turned into weeks and months, I found that the loneliness had been replaced by something stronger. Hope.